Hey everyone, as you know, the psychedelic industry has taken a hard hit in the capital markets side this year. But the key moving forward, if you're investing in this space, is find a company that has the data and also understands the pathway to get there. And this company, filled with former big pharma executives, knows how to do that. Hey everyone, welcome to the Dales Report, and happy to be joined with the CEO of Tryp Therapeutics, Greg McKee, back to the podcast. Greg, happy holidays. How are things?
Chad, good to see you. Yeah, it's going well. I'm definitely looking forward to getting the end of the year finished and having a couple of days of little R&R here in between before now and the beginning of the year. But yeah, good. Thanks. Great to be here.
You and I both, in the last few interviews I've done this week, the sentiment is the same. What a year it's been for this industry, and I know. A lot of roller coaster rides, but when you look overall at the health of the industry and the growth of the industry, forget the capital market side for a second. If you had to look back and put it into a few words, what comes to mind when you think about 2021 related to the psychedelic industry?
It's a great line of thought, right? So for sure, putting the capital markets aside, I think, what comes to mind, the word that comes to mind to me is maturity, right? The industry has matured a bit in a really, good way. There's obviously been a lot more engagement between companies on the drug development side and the FDA, say, for example. We just saw some news this morning from MindMed on that front. And, we've been working our way through a couple of things as well with the FDA. We were super excited to be able to get our fibromyalgia study cleared by the agency. But I think the maturity is sort of what comes to mind, right, as we begin to now really think through what we have to do to get these chemistries through the agency approvals and then into the marketplace to help patients. So I think it's been a big year of growth on that front for the sector.
Yeah, for sure. Well, when I think about you specifically in Tryp Therapeutics, some of the highlights when we recap the year that was had, the first thing that comes to mind is enlisting, obviously, Robin Carhart-Harris to your scientific board. And for those that don't know, how did the conversations begin with Robin? And why did it make sense after having these conversations, do you think, for him to be associated with your company? What did he like, knowing that he's huge global fixture in the mental health landscape?
Yeah, it was very fortunate for us. We had a great connection in the UK through an individual that we know who's in the space that was really close to one of the co-founders. That was sort of kicked off the dialogue. We didn't know it at the time, but of course, Robin was already thinking about making a move to the United States. So I think that may have slightly kind of, augmented a little bit of a sense in terms of his decision-making process that he wanted to get involved potentially with a company here in North America. I think for sure, as the dialogue kind of, continued, the fact that we were looking at a whole lot of different areas in the psychedelic space, right, different indications, I think that was a big plus for us. He really wanted to kind of spread his wings and look at what the potential is and will be for these chemistries in other areas, like in eating disorders and in chronic pain. So I think that was a big draw, for him. But, sort of as you implied, he's got a lot of opportunities of different projects he can get involved with. So we felt really fortunate to be able to have an opportunity to have him chair our scientific advisory board.
What's it say based on the company, knowing that you're based out of Southern California, more specifically La Jolla, like the hotbed of the biomedical industry? And for those understanding the industry, maybe paint a little bit of the picture of the landscape of what's produced in this area and why it's viewed as like an industry leader from a geographical standpoint with the talent that obviously is situated there.
Right. So there's three big hubs here. I'd say in the States: Boston, San Francisco, and in Southern California and San Diego, La Jolla. We're really known for early drug development in research. I would say that's a big, part of the talent pool that's here. We've got a number of different research institutions that are based here, like the Salk Institution, for example. UC San Diego is here and has a lot of different research they do in various different, areas. And that's really been a draw since the, kind of mid to late 80s, I would say. And there's just been, more and more talent that comes in. It's obviously it's a beautiful place, to live, and that's a big plus, right? I know you've said you've been down here a few times, which, by the way, come on back. You're obviously welcome, Shad. Love to host you for a beer too. But I think that certainly that's a big plus, and there's just a great community. There's a fantastic organization called Biocom, which is an industry organization that kind of helps get us all aligned, and Joe Pineda does a fantastic job of, with that group. But the combination is there's just a lot of critical mass of capital now that's flowing here, great talents, early R&D kind of perspective in the drug space. A lot of people that have been in the trenches and have been through several companies, over time as well. And then, frankly, a bunch of really good exits that's kind of helping drive the overall, process. So, I think that's a big plus. Going forward, we're definitely looking to expand on the commercial front, expand, on the venture, front. I think that's one thing that Boston in particular and also San Francisco, have a little bit of a leg up overall compared to, us here. But boy, it's a great place to be working in this industry down here in La Jolla for sure.
It's great. When I look, you announced collaborations with major universities across the U.S. and initiated a couple of phase 2 trials. Looking back a year ago at this time, if someone were to tell you where you would be right now, what would your reaction be?
Yeah, looking back on 2021, it was a really productive year for us on a bunch of different fronts. And yeah, it's hard to imagine, this time last year, the company had just barely gone public on the CSE.
I know.
Right? I mean, that happened, I think it was 17th, 18th of December, last year. Working with the University of Florida and Jennifer Miller was kind of a twinkle in her eye. The fact that we'd be working with Dan Cloth, the University of Michigan, on the fibromyalgia study was also just, kind of an idea that was, germinating, kind of bouncing around in our minds that now has become a reality, which is a big plus. And we also have a couple of other, we made a lot of progress on several other fronts with different academic collaborators that we'll be announcing here in the early part of next year. So I think all that has been fantastic. And, the best thing from my perspective is that we, of the 5 phase 2A clinical trials that we've been talking about now for quite a while, we've got 3 of those, effectively teed up so that when we get into the new year, so once we hit kind of January 1st, we'll be, in a position to start dosing patients very soon in phantom limb pain, in binge eating disorder, and in fibromyalgia. And I'd say, boy, that's quite a bit to be proud of, frankly, in 12 months to have gotten all that accomplished. Obviously we've got to dot a couple I's and cross a couple T's in terms of, getting BED through the FDA, but we're very close on that. And we're very close to completing our collaboration with a major academic institution here in California on phantom limb pain, but logistically, they've got a lot of other things that have already been completed. So, the fact that we can say that we've got 3 phase 2A trials essentially teed up to start dosing patients, I think is quite a feather in our cap, and I'm very proud of what the team's got accomplished this past months.
Your pipeline speaks for itself. I know you're going to agree with me when you say this because you are undervalued, and I know that right now that the industry has taken a hit over the past, it definitely has, over the past 2 months. But what's some, I guess, the communication to get people back into this space? I know a lot of institutions are expressing a lot of great interest heading into even as soon as next month. But what are key things that investors should understand about your company in addition to these trials as we head into obviously 2022?
Right. Yeah. I just did a Ask Me Anything on Reddit. Last week it was,
how'd that go?
It went terrific, actually. And I was really impressed. Of course we had the hard hitting, question right at the top about, hey, your market cap is off quite a bit. It's been a rough time in the market. Tell me why I should stick with your story, right? I'm paraphrasing, of course, but essentially that was the question. And it happened to be from an investor that we know well and that I speak with regularly. And look, it was a fair question, fastball right up the middle, as the investor would say to me. And, we dealt with that. And, of course, we got a lot of different, kind of rationale on that of why we think it makes a lot of sense. But what I was really impressed with was the quality of other questions that sort of came to the table, right? Like people are getting educated in terms of...
What were some of the questions, if you can give me an example or two?
Yeah, so for example, people were asking about, how long it's going to take us to get through these phase 2A trials. What kind of information are we generating from these trials? What's the cost of these trials going to be? Why can you do a phase 2A study with this material in psilocybin? And why don't you have to go back and do a phase 1 study, for example? And then lots of questions around, our particular formulation and our route of administration. Yeah. But they were very well thought out questions that signaled to me that a lot of these investors that are, on those platforms, and frankly, a lot of them were retail investors, are quite knowledgeable. And it was a lot of great engagement back and forth. And I really appreciated the fact that they had done their homework and they were really doing a lot of critical thinking. So, I think that in terms of the capital markets, that was really telling, for me. There's lots of smart people out there looking at these, areas. I think there is a bit more education that needs to take place in terms of the timelines and what it takes to, get these chemistries through the FDA and through phase, 2A, 2B, phase 3,
I understand, yeah.
all that kind of process, right? But I feel as if, people are beginning to understand that frankly, also the impact, the positive impact that the industry will have on so many patients, right? Once we get through, these studies.
Absolutely. I look at it as big comparison of psychedelics and cannabis when investors got into this space. They thought it was the next cannabis. And now that they're really understanding that they're completely opposite industries, one, which is the great side, is that the pure data that's being collected in the research that's being conducted in this industry is very, very telling. It's a paradigm shift in our whole healthcare system.
100%.
So saying that, do you think investors, I don't want to say lose focus, but to your point, are learning more on timelines? And I guess the big focal point is to realize that even in a time with the pandemic right now and the challenges that people have had globally related to mental health and, associated ailments related to that, do you not think this opportunity is a big one and it will have its day in the coming years?
Well, first of all, it's massive for sure, right? So even looking outside of the traditional mood disorders, right? So speaking to the indications that we're looking at in chronic pain and in eating disorders, we're looking at our top 4 indications probably represent close to a $12 billion a year opportunity, right?
Wow.
So those indications, which are lesser known, right? There's still a $12 billion a year opportunity. And of course, then depression and PTSD and anxiety and more traditional mood disorders, of course, are, massive. So 100% agree. I think the thing actually, as I've been, working in this industry now for a while and thinking about what we're dealing with, is that it's so incredibly rare to have an opportunity in drug development where, one, the drug is safe and well tolerated, which psilocybin is. And two, you know that it's already been tested in human subjects. Like, mankind has tried these chemistries, right? It's been used over decades, and we know that it works, right?
Yeah.
It is so rare. It really de-risks these stories, right? So the right, as we say in the industry, the probability of success, right? The chance that these drugs will work is so high, right? And that is such a big advantage compared to typically what you have to do in drug development, which is essentially bet the farm on some very early animal data that isn't necessarily highly correlated to what happens in human patients, right? So you're taking a flyer, right? That's very different. In the psychedelic space, we know these chemistries are safe and well tolerated and that they work. That is a massive leg up vis-a-vis other companies, and other chemistries in the drug development space.
Greg, how many years were you involved in the big pharma industry?
So all my experience has been, with biotech companies, specifically, but I've been at it since, I hate to even mention it, but it's been 25 years now this year. Yeah. 25 years.
So, this is a brand new industry in a lot of ways. What do you think you've learned the most being about this industry and the stuff that gets you excited the most about opportunities for people?
The thing that I probably learned the most about this particular is about the sector, or about psychedelics, or drug development.
I was going to say more towards actually all the above. When you think about drug development and how that coincides with, obviously, with what you're doing now related to psychedelics, what do you think you've learned the most?
Probably a couple of things. So one is that you've got to throw a lot of capital and a lot of energy and a lot of effort behind these programs, right? And you've got to be prepared for the fact that a lot of things aren't going to necessarily work out as planned, right? For sure. But when they do, right, the impact you have on people's well-being and the financial opportunities you have in these stories, it's nearly unbounded, right? It's huge, as you were saying, there a minute ago. So one, just that it's highly risky. It takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of capital and other resources. But it's certainly well worth it, right? Overall, capital that's gone into the industry has come out, and then a lot more, right? And we've also done a phenomenal job at improving, welfare. I would also say that what's interesting about the psychedelic space is just how broad the industry is and how many different types of individuals and talent there are around the space. That has been really interesting to me to see, a lot more than just sort of the traditional drug development kind of perspective, but you've got the psychotherapy perspective. You have a lot of people that have utilized these chemistry recreationally. And so the breadth of talent that's around the psychedelic space is really fascinating. It's a really great community. And it's
think about it. Dr. Jennifer Miller at the University of Florida and Dr. Daniel Clough from the University of Michigan, like two prominent doctors from two great institutions, obviously, in the U.S. It's just, to me, it's just the beginning of, I think, a paradigm shift in a lot of ways towards our medical healthcare, that you're going to start to see more and more people from traditional medicine. I don't want to say, leave that whole landscape, but they're going to start to gravitate and keep an open mind and learn more and more about this industry. And I think it's going to attract even more and more big name talent over the next, couple of years. Do you not think?
Yeah, I think that's right. Typically those types of, individuals, as you mentioned, right? So academic collaborators, physicians, big pharma players and so forth, are heavily weighted into sort of they spend a lot of time thinking about the data that's being generated, right? So they'll be swayed by the data, right, that gets generated, and which I think is a really, big push for the industry. And yes, I think that they're going to begin to, come around to see the value. I think many of them already do, frankly. A lot of them are kind of leading the charge. People like Paul Hudson, right? People like George Mashur, people like Dan Clough, right? So Dan has been thinking about using psychedelics in fibromyalgia for quite a long time. People like Robin, of course, as you mentioned. So it's really fantastic, right? Because they're right there on the cutting, they're on the bleeding edge, working with patients day in and day out. Jennifer's got a lot of patients with binge eating, for example, that she's just, literally pulling her hair out, trying to find some solution for those patients. And she's been contemplating working with psychedelics for a while, and just things came together in a really positive way, for Tryp and for her and her lab. And same with Dan. So, I think that, yes, the industry is going to draw a lot more significant players, from an academic perspective and from pharma perspective, and also, I think from a capital perspective too.
You mentioned you have to have lots of capital when you're doing a lot of these trials. As we know, going into 2022, a lot of the companies that have raised money and have done a good job will come to the forefront in doing more research. Some of the companies that were looking to raise money are having challenges, and we could see these companies go away. You specifically, are you looking to raise money? And if so, are you confident you'll be able to see the necessary requirements for your shareholders?
Yeah, we're, as an early stage company, we're always going to need, additional capital, right? We don't have other sources of revenue, yet. But, so yes, we'll be raising capital at some point, of course. It's a natural, step along the way. And yes, I'm very confident that we'll be able to do that in a large part, based on, what we're already hearing from bankers, analysts, and investors alike that we've been, speaking, to over the last, 6-9 months, plus, right? And especially as we're continuing to make very significant progress on our programs, I think that's going to, bode very well. And I think people realize that we've got a team that really understands the drug development process, and that we're making very concrete progress along the way to move our chemistry into clinical studies.
These bankers and analysts that you speak to, what do they like to see when you're speaking to them? What's the number one thing that comes to mind when you have these conversations?
Yeah, it's all about, getting to data, right? So it's either it's data, or it's showing them a path that how to get to that data set. So for us, it's very specifically data around one of these phase 2A clinical trials in fibromyalgia and phantom limb and BED, and then the others that we are looking at, hypothalamic obesity, and also complex regional pain syndrome, right? So it's data, in the human setting showing that psilocybin has activity in these two areas of chronic pain and in eating disorders. And then secondly, they're very specifically looking at data sets that show equivalent exposure or equivalency between oral psilocybin, kind of the traditional standard format of that chemistry, versus what we are working on with our novel formulation and novel route. So it's that data they really want, and the precursor to that is demonstrating that we know the right path to get there, and that we're working with credible people to make that happen. So those are the things they're looking for.
Which is where the team comes into play that you've assembled. Before I let you go, I want to wish you a happy holiday season. Is there anybody that, well, actually, I wanted to ask this question because I've been asked this for a few people over the last week or so. Looking back the last 12 months related to the industry, what are you most grateful for?
I'm most, I'm most grateful for the interaction with all the people in the industry. I think we talked about this before, but it was such a capstone event to be able to go down to Miami and see everybody in person, right? And the hundreds, I mean, there must have been a couple thousand people there, and there's probably 100 or so that we work with directly, including, yourself. And it was just.
Well, I'm 6 feet tall. When I saw you and Luke, I'm just like, I guess you got to be 6'5" at least in order to get a job at Tryp Therapeutics. You guys towered over everybody.
You got to be tall to work at Tryp. Yeah, our CSO is also, I think, 6'4". So
is he? Oh wow!
I'm most grateful for the people in the industry, right? And what one brings. It's just such a fantastic community, and the Wonderland conference that the Microdose put on was such a great way to kind of like really visualize that and really steep in that for a couple of days. So that's what I'm most grateful for. And boy, what a great place to be working and leaning into.
Yeah, of course. Anybody you want to wish a happy holiday season to?
Well, of course, I want to wish you happy holidays, right?
You as well. You as well, brother.
And of course, to my team and everybody that's really helped support Tryp, including our shareholders this last year. I want to wish everyone a happy holiday season. Best wishes, and please keep safe during this kind of challenging time with this new variant of COVID that we're all dealing with.
Yeah, of course. Well, listen, again, happy holidays to you and your family, and congrats, obviously, on a year. I know this market hasn't been kind for the industry, but I think there's some optimism, and a lot of it has to do with the research that's being conducted, the interest amongst the institutions, and I think we're going to start to see that, move, early going into 2022. So all the best, and we'll reconnect in the new year.
Thank you, Shad. Great to see you today, and happy holidays.
You as well.